Hi everyone, I'm Casey Havekes, one of the dairy management specialists with Cornell Cooperative Extension's North Country Regional Ag Team. Thank you for tuning in to another one of our podcast episodes. Today I'm joined by Dr. Tracy Burnett and Augusto Madureira, who both work in Dr. Ronaldo Seri's lab at the University of British Columbia in Canada. Tracy is a postdoc in the lab and Augusto is finishing up his PhD. I had the pleasure of meeting Tracy and Augusto at a few different conferences throughout my grad studies in Canada, and I'm really excited to have them chat with me today about practical approaches to reproduction. So thank you, Augusto and Tracy, for joining me, and before we dive into the heavy repro topics, could you please introduce yourselves and your background a little bit more, as well as the research focus of your lab?
Hello, everyone. So as Casey said, my name is Tracy Burnett. I'm currently a postdoc with Ronaldo Seri, and most of my research thus far has been focusing on the use of automated activity monitors and associating it with ovulation times and ovulation rates.
Hello, everyone. My name is Augusto Madureira. I'm also a Dr. Ronaldo Seri's student. And the focus of my research is on how estrus expression impacts fertility and pregnancy loss. So our lab basically works mainly with automated activity monitor and its association with estrus expression and fertility outcomes. So we try to use the data from the monitors to bring better results for producers and better reproductive programs.
So obviously reproduction is a really important topic for producers to consider, but are you guys able to expand a little bit more on how automation is also an important topic for producers to consider?
So we know that estrus detection is an important factor to have a successful reproductive program, but the rates of estrus detection has decreased over the years. And then some of the reasons for this has been associated with milk production, type of housing, and increase in the number of animals per herd. But it's also a very time-consuming task, as you have to look for at least 4 to 6 times in a day to be very efficient. So as it becomes harder to give an individual attention to the animals, new technologies has been created to help detect those animals in heat. These sensors can be used as management tool for each individual cow or in more farm level. There are sensors that they rely on secondary signs of estrus, as increasing physical activity, for example, and how the animals are moving overall. These sensors are accelerometers and pedometers, and they give us a lot of information and data from those systems, but we have to understand and know what to do with those numbers. These sensors have an estrus detection rate of about 75 to 90%, so we know that they can really work as long as the cows are showing heat.
So you mentioned that using these automated sensors have been a research focus for you guys. Are you able to elaborate on what research specifically you guys have done with these activity monitors as it relates to reproduction?
Yeah, so as we know that those sensors can detect, our research has as a main question, can we use the information from the sensors to be associated with fertility? And could we use this data on reproductive management? So one of the first studies that we did, we were looking for factors that affect the expression of estrus by the sensors. And we found that the parity and body condition score really impacted the intensity of estrus expressed by the cow. So what we found it was that primiparal cows had higher intensity of estrus compared to multiparals, and cows that had lower body condition score, they had lesser intensity of estrus expression. And what was really interesting from our data was that we ended up finding this strong association between activity and fertility.
And so this relationship between fertility and estrus expression is what we've really focused on. And so what we have done is really look at how much cow moves during estrus. So that could be how many steps they're taking or just general movements, and then compared it directly to pregnancy outcomes. And by doing this, what we found is that the more the cows are moving, the more likely they are to become pregnant at that insemination, and the less likely they're actually to lose the pregnancy. So this is a relationship that we have found here in Canada, but we have also found it in studies that we've performed across North America, in South America, and also in Europe. And not only do we see this association when inseminations are due to spontaneous estrus, but we also see it when cows express estrus at the end of a time to protocol. So our next step after that was to try to figure out what might be driving these increases in fertility. So we began to study the association of estrus expression with ovulation timing and failure. And what we found was that cows with low estrus expression were more likely to ovulate earlier or to experience ovulation failure, where cows with greater estrus expression were more likely to ovulate at a more appropriate timing.
So from a practical standpoint, how can this research be applied to dairy producers?
Yeah, so we just finished a study where our thought process was that maybe by administering an injection of GnRH at the time of AI, we may be able to increase the fertility of cows with low estrus expression by stimulating those cows to ovulate. And what we did was we essentially made 4 groups where we had cows with low estrus expression receiving GnRH or not. And then we had cows with high estrus expression receiving GnRH or not. And what we found was that when we looked at the control group, so those are all the cows that did not receive GnRH at AI, we found the same relationship between having higher estrus expression equated to greater fertility than the cows with low estrus expression. However, when we added the treatment of GnRH, only the cows with low estrus expression benefited. So we were able to increase the fertility of cows with low estrus expression up to about the same levels as those with high estrus expression.
And some other research that we have been working that was just published that is very applicable to farmers was on how estrus expression impacts the viability of embryos in its superovulation protocols. So what we found was that nulliparow heifers expressing more estrus, they produce more embryos. And a higher percentage of those embryos, they were viable. So they're producing more embryos than animals that are having low estrus expression. This was a very interesting for us to find on the embryo production, but also it's a very important and a physiological point of view.
So yeah, that's some really fascinating results. So just before we move on, can you guys please explain for listeners that may not be aware what GnRH is?
Oh, sorry. So it's a hormone that is naturally within the estrus cycle that stimulates the cows to ovulate. So we just administered it.
Yeah, and there's companies that sell like the synthetic.
Yeah, so it's the same, it's used within all the OVSync protocols. So we just use it in a different application. So instead of using it within a set time to protocol, for example, the idea was that we could just administer it to cows that we know have low fertility and poor ovulation rates. So we just thought, okay, if we just give it to those cows, then we could increase their fertility by increasing ovulation.
Yeah, that's really cool and a useful approach for those farmers too, right?
Yes, yeah. Especially if farmers don't really want to carry out a whole time-to protocol, because depending on which one you're doing, you can have many injections. So it is a cool way to think about it if you want to breed your cows by activity, but it's kind of like a step up for those cows that you already know are going to have low fertility.
Right. So do you guys have an area that you would like to start to focus your future research efforts towards?
Yeah, so the next research that we'll be looking into is on how the estrus expression impacts the embryo transfer, but instead of looking only at the production of embryos, we want to understand the other side as well, where we will look at estrus expression of both the recipients and the donor's cow, and try to understand the association of estrus expression with embryo development and the success of embryo transfer. The question is, do this increase in fertility come from the production of a good embryo, a good uterine environment, or both?
And then in addition to that, we also want to determine if we can use the information that we're already gaining from these monitors and use that information inside of reproductive management. So for example, if a farm has these monitors and they see that a certain group of cows has many alerts early postpartum, can they assume that group of cows is cycling properly? So the idea being, can we use these types of information to manage each cow differently and specific to her needs?
Sounds like you guys are going to be pretty busy for the next little while.
Yeah.
We hope so.
So it's no surprise that we're in the middle of a global pandemic, so I like to try to keep these interviews a little bit fun. So I'm going to end with a fun question that I would like both of you to answer. So what is your favorite dairy product?
For me, it's really hard to choose, but I think that I would have to go with ice cream.
Good choice.
Yeah, for me, it's also hard. Like, I'm between ice cream and cheese, but I really love a good cheese.
What type of cheese?
Well, there's many, like, I don't know, there is a brie cheese that's pretty good, camembert,
Stilton.
Gouda cheese. This is the good thing. You have so many different types of cheese, right? So
Yeah, also a very good choice.
yeah.
Well, thank you both very much for joining me today. I really appreciate having the opportunity to chat about reproduction and how, you know, producers might be able to use some of these practical approaches that you guys have found through your research on their own farm. So I really appreciate it, and I'm sure our listeners do as well. And if listeners have any questions, I will do what I can to answer them, but I will likely pass them along to you and Tracy.
Awesome. Thank you very much for inviting us for this. It was really nice.